Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This was a really important inquiry that the committee, of which I'm proud to be a member, conducted. We shouldn't have had it. You know, we shouldn't be in this country that we all love repeatedly talking about statistics of a woman dying every 8 days at the hands of an intimate partner. We shouldn't still be having inquiry after inquiry after inquiry into domestic and family and sexual violence, because it shouldn't be such a pervasive and enormous part of our society. I think people throw around the phrase un-Australian far too often in all sorts of circumstances. But when you think about the way that we like to consider ourselves as a country and as a people, when you think about the characteristics that we like to portray as being very Australian, they are actually about equality, about an easygoing, how you going, mate, everyone should be all right sort of attitude. And that is fundamentally diametrically opposed to a society where domestic violence is routinely described as a scourge, and where it doesn't matter which political party you're a member of, it doesn't matter which level of government that you're elected to, it doesn't matter whether you're in civil society, a leader in the workplace, wherever you are, you're committed to eradicating this scourge on society, and have been so for decades and decades and decades, and yet, we are still here today, those of us on both sides of the chamber, and the chair of the committee is sitting across from me, and I know that he cares about this, talking earnestly about reforms and funding and changes that need to occur to make it less disgraceful, the amount of domestic and family violence that occurs in this country. And the member for Warringah spoke before me, and I didn't get to hear all of her speech. And again, like everyone else in this chamber and in this parliament, I accept her and respect her genuine concern for this issue. She focused in a bit of her speech that I was listening to on deterrence and jail sentences, and absolutely there's a significant part to play in dealing with domestic and family violence in deterrence in the criminal justice system and jail sentences. But what those of us on the committee know, because there was hardly a submitter or a witness that didn't refer to it, is that we have to look at primary prevention and cultural change as not just the driver of domestic and family violence, but the solution to reducing it. And we can't just rely on punishing perpetrators when it's occurred. We certainly can't just rely on the necessary, crucial, and quite frankly, at oftentimes amazing support services that exist around the country to help women and children once they've been the victims of domestic and family violence. Of course, we have to do everything we can to lift them up and support them and enable them to provide those crucial services. But also, as parliamentarians and a government, we have to look at what we can do to stop it from happening in the first place. And that truly is addressing the actual culture that exists in homes and workplaces and sporting clubs across Australia, and changing it. And that's why the committee's report, both the bipartisan, unanimous main report and the additional comments from the Labor senators, of which I'm one, emphasised primary prevention programs and gender equality, because they are at the heart of us becoming the country that we all believe we are and we all believe we want to be. You know, it was, as our report said, the 4th action plan of the National Plan, which continued the increasing emphasis on primary preventative strategies and declared that primary prevention is the key. And I quote, "The basic premise of the approach is that gender equality is the key to ending violence against women and their children, and that women will never be safe if they are not equal."
Order. A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions. For Dunkley, in continuation.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I've got a lot more to say that I had prepared, but I can't help but note the irony that my speech was interrupted by voting, in part, on Labor's motion to remove the member for Bowman from the chair of the Education Committee, as he said he was going to do himself, because he had to stand down and get empathy training in order to understand that harassing women online, taking photographs of women in their workplace without their permission when they were bending over and their underwear could be seen, is unacceptable behaviour. And I can't help but note that despite all the fine words from the government senior benches over the last 2 days about equality and a 50-page or 500-page or whatever it was women's budget statement, and a women's ministerial statement yesterday about respect for women in the workplace, every member of the government voted to keep the member for Bowman in his $22,000 a year position as the chair of the Education Committee. So they can walk the walk. Actually, they can talk the talk. I got that back to front, right? They can talk the talk, but when it comes to actually demonstrating to all the women out there in Australia who marched for justice, who said enough is enough, we not only don't want to be killed at the rate of 1 woman every 8 days, we don't want to be subjected to harassment. We don't want to feel like our worth is less because we're female and that privileged men can exercise their power over us whenever and however they want. Apparently they don't count to this government. And I know that there are members of this government, particularly on the backbench, for whom that vote must have hurt, because they don't like his behaviour either, and they want to be able to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. But that's what this Prime Minister is forcing on his members of Parliament. That's what he's forcing on the Australian people. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And what this Prime Minister has accepted today and yesterday and every day since a brave woman went on television crying and disclosing that she'd considered killing herself because of the online harassment she was subjected to by the member for Bowman. What the Prime Minister has demonstrated is that if he thinks there's a vote in it, he'll use the words. But if he thinks there's a chance that a member of his government might not vote for him and put his parliamentary majority into some sort of jeopardy, he won't walk the walk. And that's what's wrong. In the first 5 minutes of my speech, which I wanted to follow up with some really positive examples of programs that are empowering young girls and are changing the culture of Australia, was about the fact that women will never be safe until women are equal. And we will never change the culture until the people who are the leaders of this country demonstrate the culture that we all should be living. And every time there's a glimmer of hope that this Prime Minister and his government are starting to see after 8 long years of neglect that something needs to be done, our hopes get trashed by things like a protection racket for the member for Bowman, and I'm disgusted and upset.